Hey everybody, this is Mark Levine, and you're listening to episode number 2 of the NYC Real Estate Podcast. So I'm Mark Levine, as I said, and I'm with property management firm EBMG in New York City. And today I have a special guest from my own office. She didn't have to walk very far, but this is Jill Bader, and she's my head of sales and leasing. So we're going to be talking about board applications, sales applications, sublet applications, refinance applications, basically anything that you could think of that you touch upon in our world, right?
Hello.
So, Jill, you've been with us for a bunch of years, but if you want to give a background on you and what you do, what you handle.
Okay, so what I typically do is I handle all the co-op and condo applications. I set up all the interviews, distribute all the packages that we're going to talk about. What I do is I handle everything that's involved with the process of from the contract of sale. I'm involved with questions. We field questions from realtors, from banks about lending, buying, the co-ops, the rules. And I've been doing this for 10 years for a few other companies, and now I'm here with EBMG for the past 3 or 4 years. And we just continually do this process for our whole portfolio. So it's quite fascinating.
And you're happy here?
So happy.
Because if you're not, you can get out.
Okay, I see the door.
Okay. So I made up a little bit of a list, but first let me just tell everybody that if they want to send us an email, we are capturing everybody's email questions, and they can kind of lead to future discussions. But the podcast email is NYC realestatepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. So just submit any questions that you have, and we'll be sure to tackle them. So the life of the sales process and the application, I just wanted to go through the step by step before we go through different questions that come up and process in the future. So once an apartment is listed, that's when everybody goes through. The brokers get involved. They do the open houses. Somebody likes the apartment. They make an offer. An offer is negotiated, accepted. So that's when a contract of sale is executed after the parties have gone through that.
Correct.
At that time, also, if you're going for a mortgage, the mortgage company, the lending bank has to be contacted, and a mortgage commitment essentially has to be given to the purchaser, and that also goes into this board application process. So the application is going to be submitted to management. We're going to review it. We're then going to send it out to the board of directors or the board of managers if it's a co-op or a condo. And then everybody that's on the board is going to review it. They're going to get back to us as management. We're going to get back to the shareholder, or the prospective purchaser, I should say, for an interview if it gets that far. And then they have the interview, and then it's approved or it's denied, and then they close. So that's really the lifeline.
That's the lifeline. And Mark is making it seem like it's a 5-minute process, but the whole process, you have to understand, this is taking months and months because there's so many little steps involved. Even from when you're making an open house, they call our company. Can we have an open house? Can we have signage? How do we do it? Or we have to go through rules. It's just the questions start coming from the very beginning of, I think I'm listing my apartment. What do I need to do from a shareholder or an owner? So it's a very detailed process. But what Mark had outlined, it's the same for it's like Groundhog's Day. It's the same all the time. It's just different buildings have slightly different requirements.
Yeah. So we're talking about an application in a co-op, and people that are either renting or maybe they've come from a single family home, they don't understand why. Why do I have to open up my life to this board of unknown people to literally dig through everything that comes my way so that they can approve me to live in their community? And in a proprietary lease, in a co-op especially, the board has the right to effectively look at that information. It has the right to go dig deep into the financials. They want to make sure that anybody can afford to live there, or that there's nothing kind of flagging them as I don't want to say as a person, but there's a
no
lot of
background. We can find out, and we do find out with every application. Were you ever in housing court? Did you have a default? We see all your liabilities. Everything is out there in the open. And what a lot of people don't understand is that a co-op is not real property.
Right.
It shares in a corporation. And that's the difference. It's not like owning a private home.
Right. Or a condo.
Or a condo, right?
Yeah. So you're given more latitude as a board member in a co-op to just be, by law, you don't have to give a reason for not allowing somebody or denying the application. As of now, anyway, in 2019, that's the law. You don't have to give a reason. You can just deny. But we'll go through later some interesting facts of protected classes and reasons why somebody may be denied. But it really does give the board the opportunity to fact check, a person and their liabilities, their, all of their assets. So the broker is typically the one that's going to put together the board application for our review, correct?
Right, which is a quite, I would say there's about 25 requirements usually in a board package.
And we're going to go through a lot of those.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. There's a lot of fees also, so it's not inexpensive.
No.
Beyond the purchase price, when somebody puts in an application, and we get a lot of questions to why are there fees. Typically, management contracts have those fees built in because it's individualized work for a specific unit. That's not the overall
management of the building.
Right.
We have a whole sales department that's dedicated to reviewing applications, making sure they're right. Getting feedback from the boards, getting information and questions answered. That's how we spend our days. We don't spend our days with the elevators not working or we don't have hot water. We are focused solely on sales and leasing and subleasing.
So there's usual application fees, which would be let's say the management company's review for the administrative part of reviewing that application. There's also a credit check fee that's typically charged. And then you could have also your move-in and move-out deposits that are also put with the applications themselves. Board application review fees are standard too in a lot of buildings, where not only do we charge to look at it, but the board as free, employment. They're not being paid by the building. So a lot of buildings will take a few $100s when they're reviewing because it is people's time, and the board isn't keeping this. It goes to the building, and that's an important thing to know, is that the board isn't making money off of it, but the cooperative corporation or the condo is actually padding the revenue stream by the soft revenue, which can help offset future costs. So what's the board looking for when we see an application? What's the number one thing that we get?
Okay, so the number one, if you're trying to buy a co-op, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to show, these are two things that you need to show the co-op. A, that you can afford to live there and you won't have a problem paying your bills. And secondly, and it's not as important, but it can be a factor in rejecting you, you need to prove to the co-op in some way, plead your case that you are a decent human being and you will make a very good neighbor. Because co-ops, just regular rentals, co-ops, they're all riddled with neighbors you don't want to live in the same building with. People who do things, have bad habits and loud music, and you want to make sure, you don't want to pick the people that have money and can afford to pay the maintenance every month, but yet they're having parties till 4 a.m, or they're running on their treadmill. They're not carpeting 80% of their floors. There's just all kinds of factors. You want to say, okay, you want people who are going to treat the building with respect, their neighbors with respect, and their units with respect. That's very important to the boards. To be on a co-op board, it shows that you take a lot of pride in where you live, and you have to show that. So financials, yes. Number one, your whole profile. Show them everything. Show them as much as you got. It says 2 bank reference letters. If you have 5 bank accounts, get 5 bank reference letters. The more, the better.
Make it easier for them to say, oh, you have more.
Less doubt.
Not, we have to get more, because then that leads to just a delay in the process.
Exactly.
So they're looking at debt to income ratios. They're looking at all of the expenses that you have on a monthly basis. They're looking at credit card debt. They're looking at student loan debt, Because it's not just the mortgage that has to get paid. It's also the maintenance or the common charges in a co-op and a condo that have to be paid. It's all of your liabilities that are there.
Right. And also people own other properties and they don't realize that those are potential debts. And when people don't, and people have mortgages that they don't disclose, they have other properties. They just want to disclose what they want to disclose. And when we do run the credit history, we see you have a mortgage with PNC. Oh, you do? Oh, you have no debt, but you owe Toyota Motor $25,000. Obviously, you have car payments you're making. So always be honest.
Because they'll find it.
Well, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
We'll find it and they'll find it.
Well, then we have to change your debt to income ratio. And now the boards are getting more savvy. So not only are we picking it up, but they pick it up very quickly. They do.
And it should go without saying that the one real good reason to not let somebody purchase in a co-op is financial. So any board that's listening to this that's saying, well, we have an application and we're on the fence about the finances, but let's meet them first. And then you meet them and then you say, maybe not, but you've already opened the door to them for any reason that's not financial to feel that they were let go. So if you are actually looking to make a decision before you have an interview and they don't really live up to the standard of financial, you just don't have the interview. And then that'll save you a lot of heartache.
And there are some boards that will interview everybody.
Yeah.
And I could tell you before they interview them who they're going to reject most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm a professional.
This is what you do.
I reject people all the time. Now, I'm just the bearer of bad news. It's not my bad news. I just relay the message. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. Well, we get shot at a lot, but that's okay.
That's okay. That's what we do.
So let's talk about protections. And these are reasons that in New York City, you're not allowed to be discriminated against. We can't withhold approvals for these reasons, right? So the federal status protections are race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familial status. And then on top of that, New York City is a little bit more stringent. So they have added the following: age, citizenship status, gender and gender identity, lawful occupation, lawful source of income, marital status, partnership status, and sexual orientation. So we've gone, and I've had these discussions with boards before, where instead of being in the interview and saying, oh, well, what do you do for work? Because that's a leading question and that could be a discriminatory factor. I'm more apt to say, tell me about yourself. And I do the same thing in job interviews when I'm hiring new people, because a lot of these still apply too. So it's like, okay, tell me about yourself. Because if you tell me about something, not necessarily that I'm gauging.
It's not that you asked.
Right.
You brought it up.
It came out in conversation.
And someone's going to say, well, why did I get rejected? Well, they're going to maybe tell their attorney, well, they asked me if I was married. Maybe it's a single woman. Maybe it's, we don't know. Maybe they'll take that as a vibe that, the board didn't like me because I'm a single woman, and maybe they think I'm wild or whatever. But and there are a lot of preconceived notions out there.
Yeah. And most of what we're looking for anyway in the application itself are financial in nature.
Yes.
And so let me go through a bunch of the stuff that we see in typical applications.
Okay.
So the contract of sale, or if it's a sublease in a co-op, the sublease agreement, that's always asked for.
Always asked for, and it has to be signed.
Right. It can't just be a pro forma template that says this is the anticipation. Right. It has to be the
actual contract with all the attorneys and all the terms in it.
The credit authorization, so that we could run a credit check, that needs to be signed.
Right.
And I believe that's a law. We can't run credit without somebody signing it. So we need that signed. 2 years tax returns is pretty standard. 2 months of pay stubs. If self-employed, an accountant's letter confirming earnings, and 2 years of financial statements, which is going to be important because if you're self-employed, you can say that you make something and it could be totally off the mark either way. I mean, who's going to say they make less? But
we get a lot of business tax returns too. If someone has their own business, they send in their business tax return. But an accountant's letter is always helpful because it gets very confusing too. Mm-hmm.
And then we could always reach out to the accountant if we had to.
Right.
To explain some things.
And we do.
Statement explaining details of the sources of funds. So a lot of people could get gifts. They could get transfers from family. They could have trust funds. I mean, there's a lot of we're in New York City, so there's a lot of everything, you know.
Exactly.
So we want everybody to detail as close to possible and also be very truthful.
Right. And there's also now, when I first started in this, I didn't see there's real formed gift letters that banks give, and there's a way to say exactly when the gift was given, who it's given by. It's not going to be repaid.
Is it a loan? Is it a gift?
It's notarized by the bank. When in the bank, they have to show us the actual statement of where it went in, because a lot of the boards, I guess back in the day, people used to I'm going to take $50,000 from Mark, put it in my bank, pad my account, and then I'm going to give it back to him. We can't do that anymore. They can't do that anymore. We have to see that it was been there, that it's staying there, and like Chase Bank's going to have to sign and say, this money's staying in there.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's accountability.
Mm-hmm. It makes it easier, because anyone can say a letter from I'm giving Jill a gift.
Right.
But it gives it a little more credibility.
And then 3 months after closing, that money's gone, you know, because it's paid back, and that's not good.
And it's always nice to have a detailed letter from who's purchasing, because it does get very confusing. People have all these different accounts. They have like 401ks and savings, and they're getting married, and there's 3 checking accounts. It's just confusing. So it's nice when someone spells it out. This is how we are. I get a nice source of funds letter from the people, so it can help you kind of navigate all these statements, because it's a little.
Yeah.
Some of these applications are like 500 pages.
Well, we've seen them come in boxes, and we're talking about big boxes that we have to parse through and scan. And don't send double-sided, right?
Don't send double-sided.
That's our pet peeve. And send redacted.
Yeah, always send one copy without social security numbers and account numbers, because that delays the process. You'd be surprised how long.
Well, that's just extra man hours, woman hours,
and
hours.
It gets put to the back of the. It gets pushed back because we're asking you for, you have to follow your instructions.
And we do put that on the cover pages to send one copy redacted, send it loose. Because typically once we confirm that everything's there and we've run everything, we're going to scan that anyway into the cloud.
And then we shred everything.
Yeah.
And we send it in a safe format as well, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. We use, for some boards, they like to use Dropbox, and we'll send the link. That's on our Dropbox. But for those that want even more protection, we use Ironbox, which is an encryption software. And what we do is we upload that. It gets sent out to the email addresses for those board members that review it. But separately, we're sending an email to them on the side saying, here's your specific password for that specific link. So
and it's only one password per link.
Yeah.
And then it's gone.
Yeah. Which is nice.
It's very secure.
Yeah.
Very cyber secure.
It is very.
We're very cutting edge.
And personal and professional letters of recommendation. So we want to know that you're a great neighbor, you're a great friend, you're a great employee.
Everyone's great and fabulous, but we also need an employment letter. And the employment letter has to say how long you've worked there. The terms, what you get paid, because people tend to pad their salary too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the co-op boards also, we understand you get a bonus, or they understand you get a bonus, and you work overtime, but they're really looking at your base salary.
What about a landlord recommendation? Is
very important?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had any late payment issues. They're not noisy. They're abiding by the rules where they live.
They paid their rent on time.
Yeah.
Very important that we get that.
Because what we were talking about before is we want to make sure in an interview that somebody's going to abide by the house rules. Because the last thing that a board wants to do is chase somebody around, as you said, for not having carpeting. And a lot of buildings actually now are enforcing that. Once you purchase, you either can't close or you can't get your deposit back until we verify that there's 80% carpeting, until we verify that there's been no alterations that aren't recorded on file with the DOB. There's a lot of things that we can do to really kind of press people to act within the confines.
Abide by the rules, right.
Yeah. If they're financing, a commitment letter and recognition agreements. And usually we get 3 recognition agreements. 2 go to the bank at closing, 1 stays with us.
Right, and that just shows, because like we said, a co-op is not real property. So anytime your loan for your co-op is not for Mark Levine, it's for you're pledging shares of the co-op.
Right.
So if you default, the co-ops, someone else is going to own those shares. A bank is going to own those shares. So it's important that everything is documented and it's explained, that people go to refinance their mortgages too, and they don't understand why they need approval, that we need to ask the board if they can refi, because sometimes the terms, we want to make sure that the levels of the appraisal are still, you're still at the levels that the appraisal is still, you're not borrowing more than what it's worth, because at the end of the day, if something happens, the co-op is stuck.
And the recognition agreement calls out if somebody wants to refinance, if they want to sublease their apartment, if they're if they're not paying their maintenance and they're late, we should really be reaching out to the bank that's on the recognition agreement to let them know, because they may step in if it's bad enough and take an action against the shareholder who they pledged their shares. You said just before with the recognition agreement, we need really, for refinancing especially, we need to get a letter from the lender saying that they're okay with it.
Right.
And a lot of people say, well, I don't understand why I have to, it's the same bank. It doesn't really matter.
Right.
And if you're refinancing or you're getting a line of credit, this is where a lot of people get tripped up. If you're getting a line of credit and you've already been approved for, let's say you have the 80% financing, which is standard, right? Standard maximum financing for a co-op is 80%, because a few reasons. Anything less than 80%, or more than 80%, I should say. So in between 0 and 19% finance or of your own money, you have to pay PMI.
Right.
Private mortgage insurance. So you're going to be paying an extra amount on top of your monthly mortgage amount, and that's going to skew your debt to income ratio. That's going to skew the value of the apartment. It's doing a lot of things. So a lot of buildings will shy away from allowing anything under 20% of cash. We have some buildings that don't allow anybody to have all cash transactions.
Yes.
Because they want the hook of the recognition agreement so that they don't have to chase.
Right.
Right. So,
and there's also some buildings that we have now. There's a co-op that requires, if you want to purchase for cash, they've had a lot of problems with cash purchases that, I guess they had approved people that were doing all cash deals that really weren't that qualified. But I guess the allure of, they're all cash, but now they're asking them to put 3 years maintenance in escrow, and it's on an unended escrow, that's a lot. So people are discouraged from doing all cash. We have a few buildings like that right
and
now.
that's very timely. And I'm looking for my piece of paper here, but we just got a memo sent around, and there's a new New York State legislature that was enacted in June 2019, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and it essentially prohibits any landlords from collecting more than a month of rent or maintenance, I would say.
Okay.
So in that case, let's say you're taking 3 years of escrow.
Yeah.
You're taking 3 years. Now they're saying, and it's until it's enacted and further legislation kicks out the co-op portion of that, because remember, co-ops are considered to be rental buildings in the New York City area. I mean, it's a landlord-tenant relationship. So this is basically saying that a board may not be able to take more than 1 month escrow. And we're still we're really still going through this legislature. I mean, this is a month old, and lawyers now, I'll give a shout out to Hartman, Ewell, Rose, and Ratner, and Carol Ewell, who we know as an attorney, sent this out to us. And it actually just came into our office this morning, so this is a good time for us to have this conversation.
Right.
But she gives the example that there could be huge penalties. So if, let's say, a 1 year maintenance deposit of $12,000 covering a $1,000 per month, so a year, that could result in a $24,000 award in damages.
Okay, so maybe then it's a good idea then to say no all cash sales.
Yeah.
Or if someone's just on the fence and you're going to even if someone's financially just like very borderline and you feel like you're going to give them a shot, they're a nice family, a nice couple, a nice individual, maybe the boards are going to have to say no thank you.
Yeah.
Because in those cases, we do like to take an escrow for them.
So let me go through what I was going to do this at the end, but since we're talking about this now, so we've got that. We know that you can't take, or we presume right now that you can't take, and this is really good in rental buildings, because as a landlord for a rental building, this is an easy way to say rent is X amount. I can only take 1 month of rent as a deposit or as an escrow. It also says that no landlord can take an application fee in excess of $20, which is to be used for credit or background check of the applicant, and that the landlord must waive that $20 fee if the applicant can produce his or her own background check report, which is less than 30 days old. And I don't think that this applies to management companies that are separate, like how we manage for the landlord or we manage for the co-op. I believe this is just if the landlord is taking it. The law provides that no landlord may require any applicant to answer any question about his or her past litigation relating to housing. The law provides that no late fee may be billed, demanded, or collected by any landlord until 5 days after the rent due date, and that no late fee may be in excess of $50 or 5% of the monthly rent, whichever amount is less. And it says if rent is not received by the 5th day of the month, each landlord is required to send the late paying tenant a notice by certified mail that the rent has not been received. Failure to send such a certified, and this is the certified, this is a administrative nightmare, in a timely fashion.
$6.80
Yeah.
per.
Can we build them back? We don't even know. In a timely fashion might bar subsequent summary proceedings. So if you're not sending it by the 5th day of the month and you're not sending it certified, then are you waiving your right to sue in, housing court? Yeah, it sounds like that. The new law provides that only rent may be claimed in any non-payment summary proceeding, and that late fees, legal fees, assessments, repair costs, sublet fees, etc., would have to be sued for in a separate action in a separate form, which only a money judgment could result. Evictions for not paying these charges would not be available.
Wow.
So you're only taking rent, and in a co-op, as it stands now, maintenance, and anything other than is not evictable, and you'd have to go after it separately. So that's crazy.
That's crazy. We're going to have to hire a whole other staff to send out a 5-day notice.
Yeah. Or lobbying firms to change it so it's not co-op based.
We'll get a lobbyist.
Okay.
So guarantors. A lot of college kids coming out of college, they can't afford, not everybody's working at Google and Facebook and Amazon.
But you know what? Even if they are, the prices in New York are just astronomical.
Yep.
So what's a really nice starting salary in a nice company, you can't afford to live in New York. So yeah, we have guarantors. So, and you also look better when you have a guarantor because that's kind of one of the borderline cases. So you have a nice parent that's gonna say, okay, here are my financials. If anything happens, I'm on the shares with my son or my daughter or whoever, my sister, and they're responsible. They're just as responsible for maintenance and assessments, everything, and the unit itself as the person who lives there, which is usually a family member.
So then that means that whoever's going to be guaranteeing or whoever's going to be also on the stock and lease is also going to have to provide full financials and full everything probably.
It's almost more important that their financials are top notch than the person they're guaranteeing, because the person they're guaranteeing, we know, are just starting out.
Yeah.
So it's very important. So yes, they have to be prepared to submit tax returns and all kinds of, it's a lot of paper, but it all gets looked at. It really does. As frightening as that seems.
So we've looked at the application. We've looked at the purchaser or the subletter. We've looked at the proposed subletter. We've looked at the guarantors, and now the board reviews it. We've sent it to them by Dropbox. We've sent it to them by Ironbox. And now they say, okay, we want to interview.
Okay, but before they want to interview, I have a lot of boards that will give me a list. Some boards will go through every single sheet of paper and come back with questions, and the Q&A between a board and I act as the middleman. So between us all, what I'm finding out on my own, some things I can answer by myself because I've spoken to the realtors, the people who are selling, the people who are buying. Their attorneys. I've been through this whole process with them, or answering questions and due diligence. We've done this, so I kind of get a very clear picture of what's going on, but yet the board will come back with questions. They always have questions. The ones that don't, they don't. But sometimes the ones that don't will come back with questions out of nowhere. Yeah. So you also have to be prepared. And they come back with some questions, and then once they're satisfied, this could take a day, a week, 3 weeks, depending on where everybody is. And we always have to reach out and say, hey, do you guys have any more questions? What's going on with unit 7A? Any more questions? Do you guys need anything? Oh, no, I think then it takes them a while to set up an interview. We coordinate an interview. It's usually at the building, or a lot of times in the city now I find they're meeting at Starbucks. We coordinate, or a
We have a lot in
restaurant.
wine bars. We have bars.
Wine bars, Brooklyn, very hip.
Yeah.
Interviewing
Yeah.
at Cafe Madeline, whatever. So usually I would say, how many percentage would you say are approved after an interview?
Oh, it's high.
I would say like 95%.
Yeah. It's super high.
And then it's the 5 that aren't, that you could only imagine what went on during the interview.
Yeah. And if
That
it's
they
not
got
all
rejected.
financial.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. Sometimes I wonder. That would be a good reality show, but okay.
I'm glad that we don't go there. We don't go to interviews because
we're
we
not
don't
allowed.
we don't want the liability. Just
We can't.
yeah. If somebody's going to be
God.
sued, it's not going to be management.
No. And then we get notice from the board. I get an official notice from them. Yes, we approve. And it has to be unanimous. There has to be a
Yeah.
vote. Very important.
Or at least it doesn't have to be unanimous. It has to be approval by majority, really.
Majority.
Yeah.
Better
So,
word.
yeah. And a lot of times we'll ask that the board reaffirm that at the next board meeting, so it's in the minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens is then we're trying to get the closing together. And that's a whole other so this whole process, by the way, is taking at least a month.
Yeah.
So
a long
because there's
time.
so many moving parts, there's so many parties, there's so many, but it's the same process all over and over and over again. And the best thing, my best advice is send a complete package always. Follow the instructions, put your best foot forward, make it neat, and 1 point person per party once the application is in. Because sometimes you're answering the same questions for so many people about the same item that it gets overwhelming and things get lost. And
Yeah.
I told this one, but you're not on it. Make sure everyone's on the emails. And also when we approve, another thing is a lot of people want a reason when they're rejected. And a lot of applications are rejected before an interview. And an important part is that we don't disclose a reason. And a lot of time we don't even know the reason.
I specifically ask my boards, don't tell me. Just tell me if it's approved or
Right,
denied.
I don't wanna know.
I don't want to know. I want plausible
I think
deniability.
I know, but
Yeah, but
sometimes I don't.
it's a judgment. Yeah.
And then it gets a little, it could get a little heated and people get emotional because they put a lot of time and money and they invested, they thought they were
That's a
buying their
lot.
home.
Just the application
And
itself
it's
is
very
a lot.
upsetting. So you have to really take a deep breath. It's not personal. It's
Yeah.
usually financial, but
Yeah.
you move on.
And going back to the interview, they usually expect that anybody that's going to be on the shares or living there and or both are there at the interview
Yes,
themselves.
including like children. A lot of times they want to meet
Pets
their
sometimes.
children. I have dog interviews and dog applications in
Yeah.
many buildings.
Yeah.
And
And we can go into service animals at another time, but
service animals are different.
yeah,
But a lot
they're
of-
not pets.
A lot of people have dogs that are not considered, the house rules are very broad, but yet when it comes to certain animals, some boards a pet has to be under 35 pounds. People will only one dog, and then I'll get phone calls, but they're 2 really small dogs.
Yeah.
So I asked, they're like, no, 1.
Yeah.
Is it 2 separate dogs?
It's better
Yes.
to have
Are they co-joined?
no.
No. Okay, then we need 1.
We have to keep it standard because you said not that you're setting a precedent every time, but you
No,
leave
you
open
have
the
to-
door.
Yeah, you do. You have to. We can't say, okay, you could have 2 little dogs and you could have 1 big dog. We can't do that.
What's something that I could say at an interview that would probably be a really good thing? It would be, I would love to run for the board one day and
Yes.
contribute to my
Oh,
community.
yeah.
Right?
People, yes, they are always looking to recruit people
Yeah.
on the board.
Especially if you're financially minded, maybe you're an accountant or
Yes, accountants are
you're treasurer.
big on boards.
The treasurer for the board is a well respected and often needed position. So
Right.
they
and
want
attorneys, a lot
and
of attorneys
architects,
like to be
they love
architects
it.
good on the board.
Yeah.
Engineer.
yeah.
Yeah.
So also you'll probably be asked about whether or not you want to do renovations in the apartment. So
Right.
just tread lightly on those conversations. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, we're going to be doing construction for 6 months. You may
Yeah.
not want to say that at an interview, but you want to be honest that, yeah, you're looking to do
We're
something.
thinking of redoing some updating. Updating is a very good word.
Yeah.
And then that's a whole other podcast.
So the subleasing also, there's restrictions. There's restrictions in the sense of there's applications just like there are, and we talked about that kind of with the
Right.
application process that you need to have the sublease agreement signed. We haven't even gotten into all the riders that we need to have. I mean, there's
No.
lead paint riders, there's access riders, there's
Bed bugs.
bug riders,
Stove
window guard
knob-
forms, stove knob
knobs.
forms. Right. I think we've got riders.
I think there's window bracket. AC.
There are for one building that we
Yeah,
have.
we have.
Yeah, Garfield. Okay, so there's some restrictions. Some boards actually put restrictions on the number of sublets that you could have at any given time. Banks typically don't like to have any mortgages given out to, or they've put up a little bit of a resistance if you're
Yes.
above the 15% threshold. And then when you have a sponsor that holds a large chunk of apartments in a building, they also see that as a negative because
Right, and we have a building with like a 70% sponsor rate, and you can't get a mortgage in that
Yeah.
building. So they tend to do all cash sales. It's
Yeah.
very small, but still.
I had one building in the city that was at about 20%, maybe a little higher, 22%, and they got really strict. And they said, we're only allowing you to sublease in a hardship, and we're only allowing you to sublease for 3 years total. So they took their percentage from 22% 5 years ago to now, and I did the math yesterday, it's 6%,
Really.
including sponsor, which is great. I mean, they've really
That's
turned the
really
table.
good.
And there's a lot of benefits to not having subtenants in your complex or in your building, because typically owners take care of their grounds and their apartments and their hallways and common areas a
Right.
little bit better because they care, because this is where their
Absolutely.
investment is.
And sometimes you're not even allowed to sublet you have to live there for 3 years. You could then
Yeah.
only sublet for 2. Then you have to live back in the.
Right.
There's all kinds of crazy combinations.
Yeah.
And the fees for subletting usually are very high.
Yeah, and they go up a lot of times. They go up in years.
Right.
So you could be, let's say, 20% of your maintenance on the first year. Second year it could stagger up, and then third year you're like, oh my god, I'm paying 40% of my monthly maintenance.
Right. It's a way to discourage having so many sublets.
yeah, which I'm all for.
I agree.
Yeah. So once we've gone through the interview process, they were approved. So now we set up the closing. Some buildings we do the closings as the transfer agent.
Yes.
Sometimes they have the counsel for the cooperative do the closing. In a condo, we're not involved really, except for the
Right.
final common charge letter saying that everything's been paid off. It's real property. There's a transfer of ownership. It's not
And
us.
there's a deed.
Right.
So we get the deed
Yeah.
in the office. It's
Yeah.
done.
And the co-op side, we have to handle the cancellation of the old stock and lease, and we have to issue the new one. We always sign the back of the old one so that the person
Yes.
that's leaving acknowledges they've signed it, saying that they gave up their rights to it.
Yes.
We cancel it out. Everybody
And
gets copies.
A lot of people don't realize that it is the ownership of your co-op is the proprietary lease and the share certificate.
Right.
And people don't understand that that's so important to have
Yeah.
with the raised seal, because if you don't have it, there's penalties.
Mm-hmm.
We might make you get an Eagle 9 insurance policy, which is very costly. It's to protect the building. We kind
Title
of have
insurance
to.
policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
It's a hassle.
it is a hassle. But I think that most of the time the bank loses it. They pay for it.
Citibank loses it.
Yeah. They pay
No
for it.
offense if you're listening. But a lot of people out of New York don't realize, and I think a lot of the bank branches outside of New York, they don't realize that people are just always amazed. Like, that's, you can't email it. You can't PDF it. It's the actual certificate from a stock book. It's
Yeah.
hand signed, sealed.
Yeah.
We
We want to make sure that
old
you haven't
school.
pledged it to somebody else as collateral for something else.
Yes, because anyone could show up, and that's your ownership.
Right. So it's very important. So the stock certificate is what you is the shares that you own. The proprietary lease gives you, so the stock certificate gives you the right to occupy the apartment, and those terms are spelled out in the proprietary lease.
Right. All the rule, it's more than just the rules.
Right. It's the use of the premises. It's who's responsible for what. What do I do when I want to sell? What do I do when I want to rent? What can the board do? The bylaws is really just the operation of the board and the powers that are given to the board through that. So, but the proprietary lease, whenever somebody has something going on in their apartment, yeah.
Of who can live there. Can my sister live there? Well, some buildings, you know what? Your sister can live there.
Yeah.
Without you.
Yeah.
Others.
It depends how, there's one phrase there. It's like the shareholder and their sister, brother, siblings.
Immediate family.
But the question always becomes, is it while the shareholder is in residence or is it while they're not? And is that considered a sublet?
Right.
So
it's a little
that's tricky.
But
yeah. But at closing, you're going to maybe experience as a seller some costs. You're going to have the flip tax or
and
the
there's
waiver.
always a transfer fee.
Right.
That gets paid to management.
Or to the attorney that's doing the closing.
Right.
Right. So that's the administration fee for making up the new documents, for attending the closing, for giving over the new documents to the purchaser, to cancel out the old documents from the seller. The flip tax could be, I think a flip tax is a great thing that a lot of buildings have. It stops people from the flip. You know, it's going to cost me money now if I flip because I have to pay money at closing no matter what. So that could be a percentage of the sale price. It could be a per share basis. It could be a flat fee. It could be
sometimes
some weird
it's a formula. We have some weird formulas that
we need Nobel mathematicians.
Yes, I just send the actual
the verbiage and let them
and
figure it
then
out.
I say, send it to me for review.
Yeah.
And then I review it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, looks good. But 3% of the sales price. Sometimes it depends how long. If you live in a co-op for like over 5 years, it might be 1%. If you're living there between 3 and 5, 2%. So it encourages you to stay longer, and it holds like more of a residential quality to the.
And some buildings actually do it where there's a purchaser, they pay the what's called a capital contribution fee, which should theoretically be $500, $1,000, whatever that may be, goes into the reserve fund. So it helps,
$2,700.
Well, that's a good one. I won't ask where that is, but we could talk about that later.
Okay.
The closing fees are what they are. And you can't close without them. You're paying attorneys. You're paying taxes.
It's a costly.
Yeah.
It's costly, but you're buying a house. You basically. But not a house.
Right.
Not real property, but you're buying a place you're buying your future, your home, whatever you want to do with it. That's what it is.
And we've covered. Okay, so I think we've exhausted for now co-ops.
Yes.
So condos, we'll take 2 seconds to talk about condos.
I could talk about co-ops forever.
That's our life.
I love co-ops.
I know. Well, maybe I need a new co-host. You can do this with me, and we'll sit here.
Talk about co-ops all day.
We'll just get some wine. It'll be fine.
Okay.
So in a condo, there's a right of first refusal, and sometimes there's not always.
Not always.
Yeah. So if you're in a building or you're looking to buy in a building that has a right of first refusal, that's a similar mechanism to the co-op, but not really.
Not really.
Yeah.
It's more like, I don't know, in all these years, I've never seen a condo actually.
You've never seen them exercise it.
Exercise the right. They usually waive the right.
Yeah.
So what it
is if let's say you have an apartment and I want to buy it from you and I'm your friend and you sell it to me, let's say the market value is $500,000, but because it's real property, you don't necessarily have to get, too sophisticated with passing the co-op board. But if you have a right of first refusal, if you want to sell it to me for $100,000, it's like a sweetheart deal. The board, upon review of this application, they could step into the transaction as me and buy it on behalf of the condo, and then they could do whatever they want with it.
They could redo it, sell it, make some money.
Yeah.
They have to have enough money in their reserves.
And you'd be careful because I think that they would also need to get unit owner approval for it. They don't just have blanket authority. But if it's big enough, if you're saving $400,000 on this made up deal, it might be worth it for them to do it because they'll flip it for $400,000 more if that's what the market is.
It just goes into the condo.
Yeah. So you can do it.
Right.
But that's going to be in the bylaws of the condo to see if you actually do have a right of first refusal. And it's also going to maintain the comps in the building. because you don't
Right.
want something to drive down everybody's
Right.
investment. Because
Right.
whether or not it's a co-op or a condo, there's still market value for everybody's sales and trends, and we want a healthy building.
Right.
So again, I think that we've hit the end, but if you want to send me an email again, send the podcast an email. It's nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. We're at NYC Real Estate Podcast, and we're going to be putting up some stuff there. And these actually, we're doing video as well as the podcast. So you could find that on youtube.com/XL Bradshaw. And I'll put that in the, in all the information on when we do put these podcasts out, but we're doing it once a week. You won't be here once a week, I don't think.
I can be.
If you
I'm
want
available.
to, you're a good guest. We just wasted an hour of work time. It's fine.
fine.
I think you got 3 applications while we were
I
sitting
think
in
I
here.
did. I better go redact that.
Do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we covered it all.
Yeah?
Yeah, basically.
All right. So we're good. So this will be up next week. We're going to be talking about elevators, which is the most, I think we have the most exciting podcast in New York City.
Well, I did follow bed bugs.
Did you?
Yeah, so
All right,
and
good.
bed bug sales.
Did you feel itchy?
A little bit.
I-
Just thinking about it.
Now I'm
I
itchy
do.
again.
Yeah, I feel a little itchy.
All right. Well,
All right.
thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Now-
if you have any questions,
I'll-
we're always available.
You sit in the office next to me, so I'll just be yelling at you when we go
Okay.
live.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.